He walked past me every day for 3 years without a second glance. To him, I was invisible, just another black woman in the background of his privileged life. Then tragedy struck, and suddenly, I became the only person who could save everything he cherished. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly feel invisible? That was my reality for most of my life. My name is Jasmine Carter, and I've spent the last 5 years as a senior financial analyst at Westbrook Partners, one of the top investment firms in the city. The kind of place where success is measured by the deals you close and the clients you bring in. I've always been good with numbers. They don't see color, they don't make assumptions, they just are. Every morning, I'd wake up at 5:30, put on my armor, a perfectly pressed pantsuit, hair neatly styled, minimal makeup, and prepare to walk into a world that wasn't built for me. My grandmother always told me I'd have to work twice as hard to get half as far. She wasn't wrong. Despite my Harvard MBA and consistent performance that outpaced most of my colleagues, I was often the last person called on in meetings, the one whose ideas would be overlooked until a white colleague repeated them minutes later. That's how it was the first time I saw him. Thomas Westbrook. Yes, that Westbrook, the founder's nephew and the company's golden boy. I was presenting a strategy I'd worked on for weeks, a plan to diversify our investment portfolio with emerging markets in West Africa. I'd done the research, crunched the numbers, built a compelling case. But as I spoke, I watched eyes glaze over, attention drift. Then Thomas walked in late, apologized with that easy smile that came from a lifetime of being forgiven, and casually suggested we look into African markets. The room erupted in murmurs of appreciation. Brilliant idea, Thomas. My contribution forgotten in an instant. For 3 years, we worked in the same building, sometimes on the same floor. He'd walk past my desk without a glance, eyes fixed on some distant point, as if the space I occupied was just empty air. It wasn't personal, at least not in the way most people think. It wasn't that Thomas disliked me, it's that he never truly saw me. To him, I was just another black woman in the background of his privileged life, part of the scenery, not someone worthy of really knowing. It's a strange thing, to be both visible and invisible at the same time. To be the only black woman in most rooms, standing out in ways I didn't choose, yet somehow still unseen. Passed over for promotions despite my numbers, excluded from the happy hours where the real networking happened, asked to take notes in meetings I should have been leading, small cuts, day after day, that over time leave scars only those who've experienced them can truly understand. Stay with me as I share how one unexpected moment changed everything and revealed what truly matters when everything else is stripped away. This isn't just a story about race or love or even seeing beyond our biases. It's about what happens when life forces us to confront who we really are, when the masks we wear every day suddenly fall away, because sometimes it takes losing everything to finally see what's been right in front of you all along. My life had a rhythm to it. Wake up, coffee from the corner shop, where Darius knew my order before I said a word, 45 minutes on the train, reading financial reports, then 9 hours, proving myself over and over again. Evenings were for my community garden project in the neighborhood where I grew up, teaching kids about sustainable food and business skills. Weekends for my mother's Sunday dinners, where 3 generations gathered around food that connected us to our roots. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine. Thomas's world couldn't have been more different. His morning started with a personal trainer at his penthouse gym. A driver brought him to work. Lunch was business meetings at exclusive clubs, where membership costs more than my annual rent. Evenings were charity galas, where he'd write checks with more zeros than most people see in a lifetime. His weekends were for sailing or impromptu flights to Miami. I only knew these details because the office constantly buzzed about Thomas Westbrook's life, as if his existence was somehow more significant than the rest of ours. I remember one Tuesday morning, I was heading to a client meeting when the elevator stopped at the executive floor. Thomas stepped in, talking on his phone about a ski trip to Aspen. I moved to make space, and he adjusted his stance slightly, the way you do when avoiding contact with a stranger. As the doors closed, he glanced around the elevator, his eyes sliding past me as if I were just another fixture. Not rudeness exactly, something more unsettling. The complete absence of recognition that we'd worked in the same company for years, had been in meetings together just last week. That evening, I spotted him again at Riverfront Park. I was finishing a run when I saw him at an outdoor charity event, champagne in hand, laughing with people who all seemed cast from the same mold. Our eyes met briefly across the crowd. For a second, there was a flicker of something. Confusion, maybe, like seeing furniture in an unexpected place. Then someone called his name and he turned away. Two worlds, orbiting but never touching. Until the day everything collapsed. It happened on what should have been an ordinary Thursday. The quarterly review meeting had run late, and most people had already left for the day. I was still at my desk, finalizing a report that couldn't wait until morning, when the building's emergency alarm began to wail. At first, I thought it was a drill, until the overhead sprinklers erupted and smoke began seeping under the stairwell door. As I grabbed my laptop and headed for the exit, I heard something from the executive floor, a crash, then a cry for help. Everyone else had evacuated, but something pulled me toward that sound. Through thickening smoke, I found Thomas trapped under a fallen shelving unit, blood streaming from a gash on his forehead. The fear in his eyes, raw and unguarded, was the most human I'd ever seen him. "Please," he whispered, coughing. "My bag. I need my bag." The flames were spreading rapidly, but his desperation was palpable. I spotted the leather briefcase a few feet away, grabbed it along with him, and somehow managed to help him to the emergency exit and down 18 flights of stairs. Outside, as paramedics rushed toward us, he clutched that bag to his chest like it contained his soul. "Why did you come back?" he asked, his voice hoarse from smoke, eyes finally, truly, seeing me. "Because you needed help," I said simply. "Anyone would have done the same." "No," he said, studying my face as if for the first time. "They wouldn't have." It wasn't until later, at the hospital, that I learned what was in that bag. Papers for a children's cancer research foundation he'd been secretly funding for years after his sister's death. Not company documents, not family heirlooms, something bigger than himself. That night changed everything. The fire destroyed 3 floors of our building, including both our offices. But it destroyed something else too, the invisible wall that had stood between us. In its place, something unexpected began to grow from the ashes. 2 days after the fire, a massive arrangement of white lilies arrived at my temporary home office with a note. "Thank you feels inadequate," coffee, and a phone number. Thomas Westbrook actually had to ask for my contact information after 3 years working together. That detail wasn't lost on me. Our first meeting was awkward, to say the least. We sat at a small cafe far from our usual neighborhoods, both of us displaced, both unsure of the rules for this new territory. He'd dressed down in jeans and a simple button-up, as if trying to shed the trappings of privilege. I noticed a vulnerability in him I'd never seen before. The slight hesitation when our eyes met, the way his hands fidgeted with his cup. "I've never properly thanked someone for saving my life," he admitted. "I'm not sure of the protocol." "There isn't one," I replied, "but you could start by remembering my name." He flushed, the color spreading across his face. "Jasmine Carter, Senior Financial Analyst, Harvard MBA, specialized in emerging markets." He paused. "I've always known your name. I just never knew you." Something in his honesty disarmed me. We talked for 3 hours that day, about his sister Sarah, who died of leukemia at 12, about my community garden project, about the worlds we'd both created to survive. Not once did he check his phone or look past me to see who else was in the room. For once, I was fully visible. My friends thought I was crazy. "Girl, don't let one decent moment fool you," my best friend Aaliyah warned. "Men like him don't change overnight." Maybe she was right. The following week, at a company-wide emergency meeting about relocating, I watched old patterns emerge. Thomas interrupted me mid-sentence, then presented my idea about temporary office sharing as his own. Our eyes locked across the table, and I saw the moment he realized what he'd done, the flash of recognition, then shame. Later, he actually apologized, without excuses. It wasn't a fairy tale transformation. It was messy, imperfect, real, but it was a beginning. Weeks passed, and our coffee meetings became a regular thing. Sometimes we discussed work. The company was rebuilding, quite literally, and our temporary offices put us on the same floor for the first time. Other times, we talked about everything else. There was an ease growing between us, but also this unspoken thing hanging in the air. The weight of different lives, different privileges, different pains. Then came the night that changed everything. Again. We were walking back from a late dinner when a store owner followed us out, eyes suspicious, asking Thomas if everything was okay. The implication clear as crystal. Thomas stood there, confusion melting into realization, then anger. "This is what you deal with," he said later, voice quiet as we sat on a park bench. Not a question, a statement. "Every day," I replied. This version was mild. That night, the floodgates opened. I told him about being the only black student in my private school, about the professor who suggested I'd only gotten into Harvard through affirmative action, about being mistaken for the assistant in my own client meetings. He listened, really listened, without defending, without not all white people, without turning away from the ugliness. "I don't know how to fix this," he finally said. "You don't fix centuries of systemic racism in one conversation," I said. "But seeing it is the first step most people never take." The bridge between us grew stronger after that night. Not because he suddenly understood everything, but because he was willing to try, to question his own assumptions, to hear when I told him he'd missed the mark. And I found myself opening up too, letting down the armor I'd worn so long I'd forgotten it wasn't my skin. When the company's African initiative was greenlit, Thomas insisted I lead it, publicly crediting me in front of the board. When his uncle made a dismissive comment about diversity hires, Thomas called him out, risking his position. Small steps, but meaningful ones. Then came the crisis that would test everything we'd built. The company merger announcement hit like a thunderclap. Westbrook Partners would be absorbed by Greentech Industries, a company known for gutting acquisitions. My African initiative was first on the chopping block, with Thomas's uncle claiming it was too experimental, too risky. Everything I'd built was crumbling, and along with it, my trust in Thomas. Had our connection been just another business strategy? I avoided him for days, screening his calls, burying myself in work. Then he showed up at my apartment, soaked from the rain, holding a folder of documents. "I resigned," he said simply. "I couldn't be part of destroying something that matters." He'd walked away from his birthright, his family legacy, rather than compromise what he now understood was right. That night, standing in my tiny hallway, something shifted between us. The wall between colleague and friend, between different worlds, finally crumbled completely. "You've become my compass," he told me later, as we planned our new venture, an independent investment firm focused on underrepresented communities. Before you, I measured success in dollars and deals. Now I see how hollow that was. Love grew slowly, then all at once. Not despite our differences, but with full awareness of them. We still had tough conversations. His parents barely concealed their disapproval. My friends warned me to guard my heart, but together, we created something neither of us could have built alone. The day our firm funded its first black-owned business in my old neighborhood, I watched Thomas talking with the young entrepreneurs, not as a savior, but as a partner, learning as much as he shared. In that moment, I saw how profoundly he'd changed. The man who once looked through me now saw everyone more clearly. "You know what's strange?" he said that night, as we walked through the community garden I'd started years ago. "I thought I was giving something up by walking away from my old life, but this is the only treasure that matters." It wasn't a fairy tale ending. It was something better, something real, something we're still building every day. Looking back now, 3 years into our journey together, I realize that love doesn't erase differences. It illuminates them, honors them, weaves them into something stronger. Thomas isn't colorblind now, and I wouldn't want him to be. Instead, he sees me, all of me, my blackness, my strength, my struggles, my joy. We still have moments when our different worlds collide. Days when I have to explain why something hurts, nights when he still doesn't fully understand. But he tries, we try, and that's the real treasure. Not that we found perfect love, but that we choose each day to see each other truly. Let this story remind you to look beyond your assumptions. The person you've been overlooking might just be the one who changes your entire world. Share this video if it touched your heart, and remember, love doesn't see color, but it should honor it. That's when it becomes a treasure worth more than gold.